Hi, welcome to Heritage Auctions. My name is Aviva Lehmann. I'm Director of American Art, and I'm here today with our wonderful guest, John Mecom.
Well, thank you, Aviva.
And my colleague, Mike Provenzale. And this is sort of an exciting moment for us because very rarely do our worlds of art and sports collide.
But more often now.
More often now,
Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes it happens with the Norman Rockwell. Today, our worlds are colliding in the arena of Ernie Barnes. And today, we're here to talk with John about his collection of incredible Ernie Barnes masterworks that depict every aspect of sporting life.
Well, thank you. Ernie was a very special person. Art is life is art. In Ernie's case, he really brought a feeling of what the sport was about. His characters exude, whether it's strength or action, whatever it may be, you feel like you're there. And it grew on me real quick when I saw his work.
So do you remember where you were or how old you were when you first came upon Ernie Barnes's paintings?
Well, I was a lot younger, to say the least. I think I was in my late 20s. And we were in New Orleans. We were shooting a picture called Number One. Horrible picture with Chuck Heston, but it was about the Saints, football picture. And they still hadn't figured out how to end not a real competition in an exciting way. And Chuck really wasn't that great a quarterback.
Oh.
Nice gentleman, though. And Ernie was one of the characters in the picture.
I love that.
He also just happened to have played for the Broncos and played football before.
That's right.
And we just kind of hit it off long before I knew he was an artist.
Really?
Oh yeah, I had no idea. And then when I did see his work, it just captured me. And I've collected a lot of different sporting events and sports, paintings, but his still are the only ones that really reach out and you I remember that. I wasn't necessarily there, but you feel like you were there.
Absolutely.
Looking at his paintings. Whether it's sporting or whether it's just a true life painting that he's done. He just was a very special person.
Everybody says that about him. And that's what everyone loves about Barnes's work in the arena of Black art in our country, because so many artists, Harlem Renaissance artists, will focus on the hardships of Black life in our country. He was just the opposite.
No, Ernie, that wasn't the discussion. Whatever he had to talk about and do was expressed in these paintings. And you never looked at Ernie as an athlete, an actor. He was just strictly an artist. Great artist.
I like how you mentioned the emotion in his paintings, because he spent his life in sports. He played in the NFL, he played in college, and that emotion of being in the game comes through in his art. And you spent a life in sports as well.
For a long time, but Ernie, I tried to convince him to didn't take much to do that, but to convince him to do a picture about auto racing. But again, you couldn't see the emotion of the drivers,
right,
the audience, but somehow it came through, and it took him a while to do it, but he did a painting for me in that genre. Back to Ernie, he was just a gentleman.
Was that painting one that you commissioned? Did you commission these paintings?
You know, commission's a word that we never really used. He painted from discussions. I didn't say, okay, now I want 3 cars and 2 wrestlers and 1 boxer. It's just in the conversation, he picked up something that you were talking about and would transpose it to the canvas.
I love that.
He must have been a fascinating person to talk to, because he has such a spectrum in his works, all different sports, all different aspects. And it's interesting that you say that he took it out of conversations and made it come to life.
Well, I mean, a number of times Ernie came down and our discussions were about art, but there's many times we had discussions just about life.
I love
I
that.
mean, he was a really, really true gentleman and expressed it very well and sat around this living room many times and just talked.
Always with a
Didn't
cigar
plan
in his
it.
mouth, right? Didn't he always have a cigar in his
Oh,
mouth?
he had a cigar a lot. Sometimes I did too in those days. But sometimes lit, sometimes not, just chewed on it. But he was just, I miss him. But I see him every day when I look around.
Oh, I love that. So you really, you had almost a familial relationship with him for decades.
A long time. That word is something that the present day public seems to want to stay away from. It was a true friendship.
Yeah,
I'll say that. And I counted him as a friend.
yeah. In many ways, you were sort of a muse to him, believe it or not.
Well, I don't know. I like that word. But Ernie was his own boss and his own thoughts, which he was able to transpose. I was able to see it, but Ernie wasn't able to paint it.
Did you ever watch him working on the paintings?
No, unfortunately, he never did, and I wish I had.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of things we wish coulda, woulda, shoulda,
right, right.
and that's one of them.
He had so many skills. You mentioned he was a writer, he was an actor, obviously a great painter. Was he someone that when you're talking to him, is he just, the creativity is just bubbling over and you can see it?
Well, you didn't get the impression when you first met him, first impression, that he was just an artist. But everything started with art with Ernie. And he carried it through life in a very successful way.
I read that he, even during games when he was sitting on the sideline, he'd be sketching or writing in the playbook. So it seems like he always had a passion for it, obviously.
Oh, he always did. He always did.
And that it kind of exuded every part of his life. He was finding some way to express himself or to let that creativity out.
I've only met one other artist, sporting artist like that, Bill Neal, who just did racing.
Right.
Where Ernie did anything that we, as I said, we talked about, conversed about, and anything that he really liked also.
So was he a fan of these multiple sports that he's portrayed? You know, you've got a boxing painting, a polo painting. Are these things he would attend in person or ever tried himself?
That I don't know whether he had or not, but if he didn't try it, he sure knew how to teach it
Right.
on the canvas.
He's got such a unique style, all the figures in his paintings. You can really see the grace and the power that, you know, most athletes are portrayed that way, graceful and powerful, but football players aren't always thought of as that way, especially offensive linemen like him.
Well, as I said, Ernie was a very special person. And he very gifted, I guess, is the best way to put that. I enjoyed the association. We all have regrets that we didn't do more. Like I said, I wish I had been able to see him paint
Yeah.
or see him sculpt. And I've never seen a sculpture of his except in photographs.
No, those
It's
are.
probably a good thing I didn't, because there'd be a bunch of them sitting around this room.
You are a voracious collector. I mean, it's pretty obvious from everything, all these incredibly beautiful objects around us. And what I'm thinking about as we're talking is everybody, when they think of Ernie Barnes, the mainstream world, when they think about Ernie Barnes, they think about Good Times, and they think about the Marvin Gaye, Sugar Shack. But, you know, or a work like this right behind us. This is very sort of classic Ernie Barnes. But your collection of sporting Barneses, I'll tell you honestly, Mike, you weren't here when we saw them. It took my breath away to see all of
thank
that
you. Yeah.
in one room together. You may have the greatest collection of sporting works by Barnes on the planet. That's
Well,
incredible.
To have one of them is pretty fortunate.
Ain't that the truth? Yep.
So which one is your favorite, would you say? Of all the ones, you've seen so many of his works, which one is the one that you just think about the most often?
It depends, I guess, what mood I'm in or what room I'm in. I don't have a favorite, so to speak. And along the same lines, there isn't any of them that I've seen, whether it be mine or others, that I don't like.
Right.
And I'm pretty critical about artists, about their work. And it isn't finding a flaw, it's really finding a feeling for it. He expressed that feeling, whatever it may have been.
He is. He's a very visceral artist. You're so right about that. And it really you've got to be an athlete yourself to be able to portray that on the canvas the way he does.
Aviva, I agree with you. But again, he wasn't a race car driver.
That's true.
But he was able to transpose and get into that world. And it was very realistic and truthful what he put on canvas.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, the competition and the adrenaline, you get that feeling when you look at his paintings. And he does a great job of putting you in the best spot, the viewer, when you're looking at it.
You're there.
You're there. Especially, I'm thinking about, we just walked past one of your incredible barns as a boxing scene. And the composition is very similar to other great artists who depicted sports over the years, like George Bellows, for instance, who would often people think of him in his boxing scenes. But you see the way he paints figures in the foreground as if you are in the audience, having that immediate, you're feeling the blows and you're feeling the knockout when you look at these paintings.
Well, you hear the bell. It's true.
You heard the bell. It's true. Yeah. One of the things I'm most envious of you, besides owning this collection, is you showed me some of the letters you have between you and Ernie Barnes.
Well, it wasn't just about art. He was a real, true friend.
Yeah. Those are priceless.
Well, I never put a figure on what I loved.
That's a good way to live life. Well, thank you
Aviva,
for
thank
sitting
you.
with us. We are
Michael,
so
thank you.
excited to
Pleasure.
work with you. Yeah,
My pleasure. Looking forward to it.
same here. And
Now
thank you all
and-
for joining us.